Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, to a much delayed but hopefully not dismayed Fake Accents Unite. I'm joined this evening by a quite poorly Britisher. Good evening, sir.
Good evening.
And so, unfortunately, we've all had a bit of a mare this evening. Britisher's been ill. I've been up in London looking at new property and just struggling to get back. And to top it all off, the old war wound is kicked in, the nerve damage. So this is going to be fun.
Yes, I think everybody is just imagining you now in the back of a stretched limousine being driven up and down thoroughfares of London while you're casually pointing at this house or that, going, that one. Or maybe
Britisher
maybe that one over there.
The Britisher has this obscene idea that he puts me in a class far above what I actually am.
Well, I mean, you need a property in central London with sufficient bedrooms to house all those lady netball players.
Oh, you know how it is. Well, I've moved on now. It's the ladies' international hockey team. You know,
I see.
and that sort of thing. People, Britisher is a Chad in a chat. Uh, Blow your nose, lad. Bassy Britisher. You got that sort of. But people are making jokes, I presume, or bets about whether or not we would actually get to stream this evening. From what I can see, fair few people have lost their bet, which I'm more than happy to do, more than happy to cause. So this week in particular, Britisher, there's been one news story that has generally dominated all of the
Are you
headlines.
talking about that? Are you talking about that particular news story where I got a lot of how can I put it, accusatory comments in my comment section after the week that was
Did you
because
now?
I didn't mention it?
Go
Because
on.
of course that would be a conspiracy in itself that I did not mention that particular news story. I mean, particularly with some people being convinced that I'm an MI5 agent.
Strong. I mean, there are many things that you are, Britisher, but a spy is not one of them. But
You think I would be a little too conspicuous, would you?
oh, I just don't think it's up your alley. You know, the pith helmet would give you away. It's just like
Mm.
he's wearing a German soldier's uniform, infiltrating the Reichstag, but the pith helmet it's got to remain for the sake of character, you know. And but there's one story I say which has been dominating, and that appears to be the case of Mr. Epstein, deceased.
Mr. Epstein, yes, the the
Yes.
um, the convenient death. I think that's the way one would put it.
I don't know what you're talking about, Britisher. A man on 24-hour suicide watch who is deprived of both his clothes and bed sheets with which to hang himself is found hanged in the morning.
Well, yes, but I believe he was no longer on suicide watch.
Yes,
That that's
they mysteriously decided to take him off
yes.
suicide watch, which in and of itself even more disturbing. Do you know much about the case other than the obviously this recent death?
Well, this is just it. I think sort of having looked at it, and this is why I found it rather difficult to, I when it comes to the week that was, I was write it on a Saturday, and then Saturday late night. So this is past midnight on Saturday. I tend to record it,
Mm.
and then I do the editing and everything the next day. Um, so on Saturday, I was kind of looking at this. Now, considerably more has since kind of, come to the fore since then. At the time, we didn't even know what he died from.
Yeah.
Um, you know, so I was kind of looking at this going, people are, if people expect me to comment, what on earth am I supposed to say? Because, I mean, if you haven't got anything useful to say on it, what's the point, if you know what I mean? So therefore, I just basically gave it a miss. Um, as such, yeah, I mean, this is a chap who has got effectively one conviction on paedophilia, going back to Florida.
Yeah.
Um, I know there were other cases that were also brought at the time, but he actually had that one conviction. Now, The one thing I would caution people against is just basically to therefore conclude, well, therefore he's guilty of everything that was ever been alleged.
Hmm.
Because I think what one needs to consider is how vulnerable a person to false allegations a multi-billionaire who has one conviction is to further accusations.
Hmm.
Do you understand what I mean?
Yeah.
When it comes to the whole conspiracy theory thing, I think, frankly, the people who say it was the Clintons want it to be the Clintons.
Of course.
Just in the same way as the people who say it was Trump wanted to be Trump. Because we have actually nothing to basically point us to that being the case. And of course, that's why the death is so convenient, because, I mean, maybe something would have come out. But in the end, one can only really follow that the death was very convenient to Mr. Epstein.
Yeah.
And we have to consider that you don't necessarily need the almighty League of the Illuminati and the all-powerful people overseeing the upper echelons of society to engineer such a death. If you are a multi-billionaire and you realize you may spend the rest of your life in jail, and you are effectively looking for a way out, then using some of that wealth in order to facilitate that, is that really too far-fetched?
Yeah, it's entirely possible. I think there's a lot of jumping to conclusions, but a lot of it is the meme factor as well. People like a good conspiracy.
Well, I mean, I think, in order to be fair to the conspiracy theorists, if this were a mafia trial, and the chief witness that would be able to find guilty, provide evidence against the Godfather, had just mysteriously died in a prison in which people normally do not succeed in committing suicide, and had committed suicide, everybody would be going, oh, well, isn't that convenient? And I think this is exactly what's happened here. But we have to understand that the convenience lies within the point that no evidence can be provided against the powerful. But that also means that there therefore is no evidence against the powerful. So is one's conclusion that, oh, well, he was clearly done in order to protect the powerful, really based on conviction? Or is it based on the fact that one would like the story to be true?
Oh, I don't know. Like at this point, it's all speculation. In general, on everyone's part.
I cannot really see how it could be moved on much further. I mean, unless someone comes to the fore and basically said, I murdered him and Hillary Clinton paid me to do it.
One prison guard has mysteriously received an enormous amount of money very quickly.
Do you understand what I mean? Unless something like that comes to the fore, which one would assume people, if they really are so conspiratorial, they would be smart enough to avoid that?
Of course, you're ignoring the obvious conclusion, though, Britisher, which is that a 20-year-old version of yourself committed the act.
There is, of course, that. Yes.
For those of you wondering in the background...
I cannot rule out that possibility.
For those of you wondering in the background, the Britisher is not consuming tea this evening, he's consuming tomato soup. The same colour as his jacket.
Yes. I am on a tomato soup diet with a piece of toast. To basically explain things, sort of over the last week or two, there seems to have been a dreadful lurgy that seems to have gone around the vicinity, slaying people left, right, and centre. And of course, the moment you become all smug about it, thinking, oh, well, this one is passing me by, that's when you suddenly you inherit a cough from someone.
It does have something to do as well that you are insufferably ancient at this point as well.
Of course, yes. My immune system died somewhere around the Middle Ages. Yes. So yes, it basically it didn't get a hold of me completely. It kind of crept in, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
So it kind of, I got one little bit more of a niggle after the other. By Saturday, the writing was on the wall. By yesterday night, I looked pretty much dead. And today, it's just in full bloom. I mean, I'm sitting here clutching a handkerchief, and I've got a nasal spray here, and yeah, it's I am
It's
I
something
am
which would have previously made a perfectly good cravat. And
yes, I am perfectly pathetic, I think is the way to put it.
there you go. Nobody clip that and send it to AA for him to use in an upcoming rap battle. I'm perfectly pathetic. I'm perfectly pathetic. Yes. A couple of super chats come over.
Well, you do realise that you've now also provided him with a line from yourself.
Oh no! Just shush, shush. Our favourite Scandinavian electrician Skoen coming in here says you're 1,336 plus 3,600 planned seconds late. So thank you for that, Skoen. Little Aotiera. Oh,
trust the Vikings to be pedantic, eh?
Of course. Little Aotia Boa, I could never pronounce her name, says, you two and Sarah do need to do an audiobook reading of Beatrix Potter's works. My little sister would adore this. That's, I could float to the idea. We could do something a little less black-pilled for once, and a bit of Peter Rabbit would come in, Irate Pirate says, stay away from hockey girls, mate. Trust me. I don't want to, feel free to reveal more of that story to us, Irate Pirate.
Well, I think it's a lesson you are keen to learn, isn't it?
It's very keen. It's 7 or 8 times, wasn't it? Again, Irate Pirate says, I, for one, am a big fan of Hillary Clinton, and Alex Jones is most definitely not looking more and more correct. That's a sad thing. I would like to... I don't know what to think on the Epstein case. I genuinely, the potential is there, and there's enough potential for a conspiracy that I won't rule out the conspiracy, but at the same time, who it benefits and why.
Well, yes. I mean, the whole thing about the conspiracy is that if it is a conspiracy, it is in order to prevent evidence coming to the fore, which is the very reason why no one has any evidence to actually take it any further.
Because he was the linchpin for that evidence.
Yes.
The idea was that he would sing like a canary, as I think a couple of people done it. I know Sargon's done a couple of videos on him this week, but I haven't been able to watch those. Tim Cornish says, a 20-year-old Britisher. I love that this meme is a thing, by the way. I absolutely love that. What did we have? We had the Find Britisher meme at the beginning of this show, and now we have the 20-year-old Britisher meme. I like it. A 20-year-old Britisher coined the phrase, the game is afoot, well before Shakespeare did.
Oh, of course, yes. There's no doubt of that.
And I believe he said it roughly while he was coming across a great dinosaur's footprint back in the Cretaceous period.
Yes, I was on a Tyrannosaurus Rex safari at the time.
You had brought back an elephant gun.
Yeah, I was there with an elephant gun and my pith helmet, stalking the dinosaurs. All this talk about a meteor, a complete nonsense. It was me who made them go extinct.
Every single one. You managed to kill the dinosaurs
hunted, yes.
faster than they could breed.
Yes, that was during my hunting period. Yes.
It's like the British had a minor relapse into this kind of behaviour when the what was it, the buffalo in America, was it, or was it bison?
Oh yes, I was the one who introduced the fashion of shooting at bison from the train. Yes,
just for fun. Mr. Gently Benevolent says, I did not have suicidal relations with that prisoner. 20-year-old Mr. Britisher.
That's me.
And the Mad Mercenary says, a 20-year-old Britisher is the real father of Prince Andrew after a night in Africa with the Queen. Also, congrats to the winner of the competition. Thank you very much, Mad Mercenary. Several people.
Actually brings me on to something, because Mr. Farage has been in the news today.
Oh yes, he has, hasn't he? I noticed
because he's been saying a thing or two about the royal family.
Yes, and I noticed that Mr. David Lammy weighed in on this as well.
Oh, did he now?
Let me see if I can find the tweet.
Because, in order to sort of go on about Mr. Farage before we get to the Lammy reaction, he was talking about how Prince Harry has lost a lot of popularity. I think he used the term his popularity has dropped off a cliff, even though previously he was just about the most popular royal.
Yeah.
And I think when he's talking in that regard, Meghan Markle isn't going to win any popularity prizes here in Britain.
Thankfully.
So, as such, he's really on fairly safe ground for a politician. However, there are one or two other things he said beyond that. And I think they have the potential to do him some political damage.
Go ahead.
There was one figure about it was an unwritten law in the media. You did not make fun of that particular person. You are more than likely too young to remember this, and that is the Queen Mother.
Mm-hmm.
So he made some comments about the Queen Mother being some, the equivalent of a gin drinking biddy that got to over 100 or something like that.
Good grief. Okay.
And the thing is, to a considerable part of the population, the Queen Mother was, when she was still alive, something akin to a living saint.
Yes, I remember. There was a lot around the Golden Jubilee. I remember that and stuff like that.
Yeah, so she, he will not have made himself very popular with, let's say, an older generation. This is an older generation that will have still remembered her alongside her husband, the King, visiting the bombed out East End in London during the Blitz. So those are figures which you touch at your peril, if you know what I mean. So I wouldn't be surprised at all if that might rebound on him.
Well, I'd be curious to see if he responds in any way over the next couple of days.
I mean, always considering what sort of generational part of the population he relies on. Do you understand what I mean? He's in a way shooting at precisely that part of the population which would more than likely provide him with his staunchest support.
Yeah, obviously the Farage party is not the party of the young. Let's put it that way.
I think that's fair to say, yes.
What his actual comments were: the Queen is an amazing, awe-inspiring woman. We're bloody lucky to have her. But when it comes to her son, when it comes to Charlie Boy and climate change, oh dear, oh dear, oh dear. Her mother, Her Royal Highness, the Queen's mother, was a slightly overweight, chain-smoking gin drinker who lived to 101 years old. All I can say is Charlie Boy is now in his 70s. May the Queen live a very, very long time. And that sort of thing. And I want William to live forever to stop Harry becoming king, was the other thing.
Well, there is no danger of Harry becoming king, because even if something were to happen to William has now children of his own, all of whom supersede Harry in the lineage to the throne.
In the ascent. Well, yes. David interestingly, Nigel doesn't actually attack Meghan directly. He says that Harry met Meghan and he's fallen off a cliff. We've been told in the last week that they'll only have 2 children, and we're all ignoring the fact that the population is exploding globally, and we shouldn't care about keeping the population under control here. We need to safeguard our future. So he didn't do it, but David Lammy says, "Lay off Meghan, you bellicose toad." And a lot of people,
because of course, his saying something about Meghan would be racist, wouldn't it?
Well, not even that. It's just what I find funny is that the comment was used as a jumping, a springboard to attack Harry, and all of the comments in his. In fact, I would share my screen, but I'm not entirely sure how to do it on OBS just yet. I will find a way to do that by next week. But basically, he says comments like "and Harry also," and all this sort of thing. All of Harry's humour is gone. You might want to call him out as well, and that sort of thing. a lot of people, and now there are a lot of FBPEers in the comments as well, saying that Brexiteers are anti-monarchist. They keep making coded references to civil war, attacking the other royals whilst covering it with "our dear old Queen, God bless her" rhetoric. It's a cover. They want to get rid of them. Sad face. So, like, lay off Meghan, but not lay off Meghan and Harry. Well, I wonder what could possibly explain that.
Yeah, the Brexiteers being anti-monarchy is a bit of a stretch, isn't it?
Just a dash.
I think if anything, one would think that one would find a considerable larger proportion of Republicans among the hashtag FBPE crowd.
Yes. The FPP, it's not even that they're. I think the monarchy in this country has a kind of a special place aside from the whole Brexit negotiation. The Remainers claim the Queen because of that particular outfit that she wore on a day near the referendum that happened to be blue. The only thing they were like, oh, if only the hat had yellow flowers in it or something, then people could have, understood, because she wasn't allowed to have a position, was she? They're supposed to be apolitical.
Yeah.
And so there's that side of things. But, what I think monarchists versus anti-monarchists is kind of a split issue, although I would definitely say that Little Englander Brexiteers, as we're called, are definitely more in favour of the monarchy than, in general, than Europhiles who would rather we didn't have a government at all and we could defer everything to Brussels. That general case.
Now, just for a second there, I was wondering whether I'd lost you. I'm always worried that if I press anything at this end, that something goes terribly wrong. Ever since we're on this Discord system. So then, for a moment there, when you fell silent, I went, "Oh, have I just clicked something I shouldn't have done?"
No, I don't think so.
But this time around, perhaps the chat can confirm this. I don't think we seem to be cutting out as much this time round, are we?
I certainly hope not. The stream bitrate appears to be a better connection this week, so perhaps it's having too many people on or something like that.
Yep.
The mad, Architect of Fate has just sent in £5. Thank you, $5. Says a 20-year-old Britisher has all of the information on the Clintons. Run, Britisher, run. Because even if you don't have any information, people will believe that you do.
Oh, well, you see, but normally deaths related to the Clintons happen in terms of suicide, controversial suicides or aeroplane crashes.
Mm.
And I stress aeroplane crashes, not time machine crashes.
The time machine can't crash, it just lands in a different era to what you were expecting.
Yes, precisely. So, if anything, they might deflect me off course and I might suddenly sort of arrive somewhere in the Napoleonic era and then have to get the crank handle out and start it up again in order to get to where I was actually heading.
Lumberg says, Harry went Chad to cuck in record time. It's amazing. Well, you know what they say, love of a good woman and all that. It clearly works both ways. I think it's a shame.
I'm just wondering, how do I send you in this day and age? Hang on, I can use the messages in Twitter. That might be the best way of getting a message to you.
I mean, there is a stream chat in...
Yes, I've tried getting into that, but it won't let me.
It won't let you? Ugh.
Yes, it was while I was clicking on that, you suddenly went silent, and I wondered whether I'd broken something.
Oh dear. Okay. Well, yes, you can send it to me on Twitter. I will find it. I thought you were going to say the clitoris. That would have been funnier. I'm clearly talking about the Clintons. No, what was I talking about? Meghan, yes. There's a lot of people thinking that eventually she'll be Diana'd. I believe
I don't know what her status is. I believe she is the Duchess of Sussex at the moment, is she not?
Don't remind me.
At the time of her marriage, there was some debate, and it never seemed to be cleared up, whereby it wasn't quite clear whether she is to be addressed as Her Royal Highness. So this is one of the things that is in the gift of the Queen, apparently.
Hmm?
So could it just be that, like many others, the Queen might see in the Duchess of Sussex another Duchess of York, and therefore may just have decided that it might just be wise not to be issuing the title of Her Royal Highness in order not to cause too much consternation if one later needs it back.
What's this this image you've just sent me here? This the
Well,
Queen.
that is the Queen Mother with the King, the Queen's father, in the Blitz.
See,
So you see, this is how an older generation remembers the lady in question. So they won't. So with images like that, kind of tattooed on the national consciousness of those particular generations,
mm.
they won't take very well to being told that she was an overweight gin drinker who
Basically
lived to 100.
outlived her time. Yeah.
Yeah, so because no, those particular images of her in the Blitz are kind of those things which kind of lifted her in the popular imagination to something akin to sainthood.
Yeah, I remember the sentiment around the Queen Mother and the Queen has always been very high. The
Yes.
the following royals, I don't think there's
No,
anyone
the
can say.
following royals don't have the same levels of respect.
No, like the
In
Queen,
all fairness,
it's about duty. I think a lot of the time.
well, yes, but I think the incumbent has an advantage over everybody else. It's as simple as that. You know,
Yes, if things are going
um,
pretty well, and
it if the fact that the Queen has been around for so long works in her favour. Had Charles been on the throne now for 25 years, people would see him considerably differently
mm. You
than
reckon?
they do. Yes, I'm strongly convinced of
You
that.
reckon they would
Yes,
sing songs to the tune of "Good King Wenceslas"?
of course. Of course, I think that it also would have then meant that for the past 20 to 25 years, he wouldn't have been telling us about environmentalism and hugging trees. Because it's effectively understood that once you're the monarch, that goes out the window.
Yeah,
And therefore, I think people would see him in a considerably different light. The fact that he is just the man in waiting, who somehow has to fill his days. I mean, I think we all can kind of. It's not too hard to feel a certain degree of sympathy for him.
I mean,
Um,
you can feel my sympathy for me, Britisher.
yes, yeah, but when it comes to in a way criticizing the later generations after the Queen, the public is fairly forgiving. However, when it comes to the Queen herself, or particularly when it comes to the Queen Mother, that's when things get very, very tricky.
I find it
And therefore, I think that might be a comment Mr. Farage might come to rue.
interesting as well. I have an awful lot of respect for Queen Elizabeth at the moment, and but it's actually difficult to put my finger on why. She's very stately. She's got an enormous kind of dedication to duty. She goes on all these engagements all the time, and really, genuinely, she just seems like you don't even see her as an old dear, even because I can still look at the photos of her when she was going down around cavalry division and stuff like that, and generally uh, doing her state visits in her youth as well, and you can see that same bearing with her. I suppose she's kind of at a point of, or she has been a point of calm in the storm of politics amongst leaders and division, and she just doesn't seem to have an aggressive agenda, to
Yes. Yeah. I mean, I
and that's
think
part of the appeal.
she understands the role of monarch as being ceremonial.
Yes.
but she also seems to have an incredible, and that is, I think, what people are missing in the later generations. She seems to have an incredible sense of self-discipline, that
Hmm.
one feels that she is actually quite stern on herself.
Yeah, I can see that.
Um,
Definitely see.
and therefore, well, if one must stand there for half an hour in the rain, then one will do so.
Yes.
Whereas you've got the feeling there are not a lot of people of her age who would play that game.
And let's face it, she doesn't shake like Angela Merkel does in a light breeze. So,
Well, yes, there is that. But then I think in the case of Angela Merkel, it is just that nature has come calling.
what you mean? The
Um,
Reaper has finally come to take her back from whence she came.
yeah, along those lines, I think one is suffering from Hillary-itis.
Possibly, possibly.
Well, I
Um,
mean, it's simply a cruel reality that in order to be a leading politician, not only must you preserve your mental faculties, but you also need to be in good physical health.
well, it is an awfully long work week, to put it bluntly.
Yes,
If
yeah,
you're working in that position, you are working 120, perhaps
yes,
more hours per week.
and it always depends on what country you run.
Yes.
Let's not forget Jean-Claude Juncker was the Prime Minister of Luxembourg.
You mean those entire 12 people that live in Luxembourg?
Yes, it cannot be the most challenging task to be taking care of Luxembourg. And that's what I mean. If you go through the little countries and then gradually you scale up, at some point you get to sort of the more major nations, and that's when it becomes a much greater task.
I have a couple of related to royals super chats coming in. So the Harry Channel says Meghan Markle is the royal family's Yoko Ono. And you're right, Brish. You quite like that analogy, do you?
Yes, I do. There is more than a grain of truth in that. Yes.
And let me see. Irate Pirate says, "Do we think Meghan would be in any way interested in Harry if he wasn't a prince?" I don't know whether or not that's a necessarily fair accusation either. I mean, he was a serviceman, military boy. As much as he was, had to be protected, etc., and given extra status, as it were, in the sense of he's not going to be sent to the front line to die, right?
True, but it's a bit of it's a sort of a Cinderella question thing, isn't it? If he isn't the handsome young prince, does he actually hold out quite as much attraction?
There is also that. But also, I don't kind of resent Meghan for that either. I mean, if you look at sake,
Well, I think
William's wife? Like, just because I'm forgetting for a second here.
Kate Middleton.
Kate Middleton, right?
Yes.
She insatiably, shall we say, she hunted him down and made him date her. Basically, she turned up to every single event that he was at. It was almost stalkerish. And I definitely think some of the appeal there is, the royal family aspect of it. So don't.
When it comes to the Middletons, please let me share you my own personal pain. The one thing
you father the Middletons?
Oh, well, now that you mention it. No, when it comes to the Middletons, the one thing that I remember was the sister of Kate Middleton.
Oh, yes,
who goes
Pippa.
by the name of Pippa
Middleton, yes.
Who, let's say, stole the show at the wedding in a rather slinky dress.
Yes, I remember, and a nicer
Let's
hat.
just say it was figure hugging.
Yes.
And her job was to carry the back of the veil, if I recall correctly.
Yeah.
That meant as the royal couple were making their way into the church, What the nation got full sight of was Pippa Middleton's rather shapely derriere in a very tight dress. And the next day, the newspapers were split between pictures of Prince William and his new Princess Catherine and shots of Pippa Middleton's rear end. And Pippa Middleton's rear end became a bit of a celebrity. So much so that Pippa Middleton then got a book deal.
Yeah. I do.
The book that she wrote, I think, was on how to organize parties and whatever, became a bit of a meme mine. That people were making fun of it for just stating one obvious truism after the next. But yes, if you are the person whose rear is rather well formed and faces the camera during a royal wedding, there is a good chance you may get a lucrative international book deal out of it.
So a 20-year-old Britisher was definitely the arse stunt double there. What else do we have in here? People.
Well, what is that? What is that? There is a little anecdote about Some Like It Hot, where Tony Curtis and Jack Lemmon, obviously in that particular film, they dress up as women in order to escape the Chicago mob, and they go with a female jazz band. I think they go down to Florida in order to get away from the massacre that's just the Valentine's Day massacre that's just happened. And therefore, they had the same tailor on set as did Marilyn Monroe, who was obviously also famously part of the movie. And when it came for them to have their measurements taken, it turned out that Tony Curtis had a smaller backside measurement than Marilyn Monroe. Which, of course, led him to spend the rest of his career to claim that he had a better arse than Marilyn. But there you go. Moving on.
What a fantastic anecdote. Also, I didn't realise this, but your reveal here that you have a copy of the royal wedding of William and Kate, and that you watch on repeat every day with your morning breakfast the entry with the veil.
Pippa Middleton, yes, yeah.
Middleton.
Yes, no, I can honestly say this is one of them that I am recalling from memory. I remember that particular wedding. I remember how it was an impressive sight. And I remember how the next day the newspaper just went gaga. I mean, to give you another example, what was, perhaps the chat knows this. I would recall a name, but it would take me half an hour. What was the wife called of Nicolas Sarkozy? She was a model who married him while in office, president of France. She's got some kind of Italian-sounding name, if I remember rightly. And she was most certainly, well, she is a looker.
Which wife? He's had 3.
The one he married while he was in office as French president. You know, I mean, he may have had plenty of wives, but he didn't marry too many of them while he was president.
Are you thinking of Cecilia Attias or Carla Bruni?
No. Carla Bruni, that's the one, yes. And now you have to understand, this was an international model. So now consider you are a model, so you know how to handle yourself.
I am a model. I do know how to handle myself.
Now consider that you are the new wife to the president of France. France being the fashion capital of the world. Now consider, now that basically...
Your career is somewhat taking off at that point.
This is now like a nuclear assault on the world. Now consider that the French president takes his wife on a state visit to Great Britain, the home of the most rabid tabloid newspapers in the world. Then consider the photographs all across those newspapers the next day. If I recall correctly, it was Gordon Brown who welcomed Nicolas Sarkozy. And obviously the Queen also had to because he was the head of state and this was a state visit and so on. But she was center of every single photograph. At times, the royals or Gordon Brown or even her husband wasn't the shot. It was just, it was
The only
just,
thing people cared about.
it was just nothing else but Carla Bruni. And it was hilarious that one
Like,
could kind of see that all the photographers were kind of, oh, forget the rest of them.
well,
For
listen,
once, we've actually got someone photogenic.
the
So they just went for it.
yeah, it is funny, isn't it? Because it just makes you reaffirm the stance that it doesn't matter what's going on and what's political. There's nothing more valuable in this world to people than an attractive, powerful woman.
Well, I mean, it was fantastic. And then, of course, that was the state visit of Nicolas Sarkozy. And Nicolas Sarkozy effectively didn't exist on that state visit because all the photographs were of his wife. Then his successor was, oh God, Francois Hollande.
Yeah.
And Francois Hollande suffered from a similar problem as did Nicolas Sarkozy, namely that he's very short. And what did he do? He arrived, and you know how they invite you to inspect the royal guard.
Okay.
So you can do what Donald Trump did and walk down the line of soldiers and look at them and perhaps exchange a word or two or whatever. You're inspecting the guard of honor or whatever.
Yeah.
And of course, Nicolas Sarkozy, I think at the time just demurred. Just, oh, no, I'm fine, I'm fine. Whereas, of course, Francois Hollande, just new in office, decided, oh, well, yes, I will play General de Gaulle and I will walk down the line. Well, of course, you have to understand this man was very short. And the colonel who showed him around was close to 7 foot tall.
That's an amazing picture.
On top of that, you have to consider that they're all wearing those bear skins.
Yep. So it's like
it looked like a little boy being led by an adult down a tunnel formed by giant men.
the only thing that could have made it more childlike is if he'd been wearing shorts.
Yes.
There's little grey suit shorts.
The French press the next day were merciless. And it was just basically all the headlines were something along the lines of, you fool, you absolute moron. I mean, did you really think that they wouldn't have their biggest and finest soldiers there that would make, let's face it, any man look
small, but especially you.
Yes.
But
here
the thing
you are
is,
with all your 5'1" or whatever you are, and you look perfectly ridiculous.
Look, but the thing is, like, what could you do if you're him in that perspective? Like, you can't really refuse to do the thing. It's what they all do. So, aside from riding down next to them on a horse, which makes you look like you've definitely got a Napoleon complex, or or wearing such high platform shoes that it's obvious that you may as well be on stilts. Just I don't know how you could have got out that one, but it is funny.
It was absolutely merciless because I think it was pretty much the very beginning. This was the first state visit, and it was very shortly after I think he had come to power. So no sooner was he in power, he was already made a complete fool of, and the press already decided that they hated him. There was no way of coming back, and that's why when it then came to the election after that, it went to Macron, and it otherwise would have been Le Pen, with, I think, with Hollande coming in close to something like, was it 14% or something like that?
Yeah.
It was just, it was abysmal, that the actual ruling party should just be somewhere among the also-rans.
How do I spell this chap's name? It was...
like Holland.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Holland, okay.
So Francois Holland.
With an E on the end. And God.
Yeah, sort of
See what I can
state
find.
visit or bear skins
Yes,
or
here we
anything
are.
like that will
I will save because people are asking me to share the image in chat. So you want add an image here. Image 2 hours.
yeah, I've got one here.
Yeah,
Hang
I've got
on.
one.
Okay, yeah, it's when he's pretty much next to the colonel being led down, the colonel just towers above him, and so
Here
does
we are.
everybody else.
There we go. Just a little bit, and you can see the chap in the back as well. Or you will be able to when this pops on screen. There's just a chap smiling behind him. It's just clear. I mean, although he's not too much taller himself, that is quite. Um, there you go. You'll be happy with that. What was I going to say? I will not miss out little AOT Aurora.
Well, I think this one is even crueler. Hang on.
Oh yes, do send it to me over Twitter. Little Aotia Rower. Goodness sake, I will get that pronunciation. Says just had to do some personal research on Pippa Middleton. Thank you very much. Thanks for that.
Well, I'm always I'm always keen to help facilitate people to get a sight of pure beauty. Hang on, that's actually been the article, hasn't it? So that's the picture.
Yes, but I've got the picture.
Yeah, that particular shot that I'm looking at is one that is taken from slightly below, which of course emphasizes the height even more, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
And yes, it was just that. But as I say, what was so funny about it was that it wasn't so much the British press, it was the French press, which was merciless, going, "Are you out of your mind?"
Oh, bless him. He did. He tried.
He tried very hard.
But it's
Yes,
amazing how
yes.
one thing can tank a political career as well. I remember there was that chap in America, wasn't there, who got a little bit over exuberant in one of his speeches, and he made some sort of he-yah noise
Oh,
or
the
something.
rebel yell. Yes, it was
Yeah.
I don't remember. It was a Democrat presidential candidate, and he had his chances had just been boosted. Yes, that's a beautiful photograph. That was. And yes, he did that kind of yeehaw, sort of rebel yell kind of thing, and it was a moment of sort of over exuberance, and it cost him any chance at the presidency.
Yeah, it was
Just within
memed
within a
into oblivion.
section, it was gone. Yes,
Absolutely memed into oblivion, and
it's precisely that what is presidential and what isn't.
yeah,
Which, funnily enough, with this particular incumbent president, has gone out the window.
yeah. But at least he has been consistent. So even from the beginning,
He's
he was
been consistently unpresidential.
exactly
Yes.
right, and that's what people have
When
enjoyed about him because they're sick to death of what the conventional presidential candidate looks like.
When it comes to that, there is a parallel in British politics, and that was Neil Kinnock, who seemed to be running high in the polls. Everything looked to be going his way. And he headed to a conference kind of on the eve of election, if you know what I mean.
Mm-hmm.
And everything kind of seemed to point to the fact he is going to win. And he arrived there, and there was some, with it being the Labour Party and the red rose being a symbol of theirs, I don't know whether there was any pots with red roses in it or something like that. But Neil Kinnock got carried away. And he was sort of shouting, "Oh, it's all right," or something like that at the crowd, who were then responding. And then he was going, "Oh, it's all right." And at the same time, he was throwing roses into the crowd.
What?
And yes, and Peter Mandelson, the éminence grise of left-wing political politics. Political politics? What am I? This is the flu talking, ladies and gentlemen. Um, he was he was an advisor at the time. I think he was one of the chief advisors to the campaign. And he was standing at the side of the stage looking at this happening. And he later said he just basically buried his face in his hands, going, "Oh,
What
no."
is going on? Yeah, what are we going to do? There's
He
no
just
way.
realized Here was a train wreck happening in slow motion. Their candidate had clearly got over exuberant. He was basically thinking, I've won. And he knew this was going to be beamed into every household around the country. And this was not going to go down well in Britain. And poor old Neil Kinnock, for whom I share a considerable amount of sympathy, he just buried himself at that particular evening.
I tell you what, who I have seen burying herself recently, Caroline Lucas, in the last couple of days. Yeah, so you know about this?
The lady of "This is what a feminist looked like" T-shirt fame.
And she obviously took to Twitter to bring out her wonderful idea for an all-female cabinet to stop Brexit.
Was it Twitter? I thought she had announced it in a Guardian article.
Maybe it was in a Guardian article. I definitely saw a version of it on Twitter, on her Twitter account. Let me see if I can go to her account.
She basically announced that what was needed in these desperate Brexit times was an all-female cabinet, because women can sort out things and are less tribal than men.
She put it out. She said, "Thanks for all the comments on my proposal. I wanted to start a debate, and that has happened. But it's also thrown up important questions about who is on the list and why. An all-white list of women wasn't right, and for that I apologise." Yeah. And she released an official statement.
So it was an apology, not for saying the men can't handle it, that the country ought to be run by people without penises, but it was an apology for lacking intersectionality. That says just about everything, doesn't it?
So her tweet was, it was a Guardian article, but she also tweeted it out, and obviously, and says, "The country is at breaking point and time is running out. I couldn't forgive myself if we didn't try everything possible to avert catastrophe of no deal. So here's an idea. I know it's controversial and many will say it can't work, but what if it does?" And Rubber, our good friend Rubber, has even commented on this and says, "I'm at breaking point and time is running out. I am desperate. I want to try everything possible to overturn a democratic vote. So here's an idea. I know it's misandrist and most people will say it's mad, but like I said, I'm desperate. Maybe it'll work."
Well, I just would like to just take this opportunity, because I can already see in the chat people are effectively saying the British are communist confirmed. This is what you get just simply for expressing sympathy for a Labour leader. The moment that you effectively accept that even a Labour leader can have a smidgen of humanity, it immediately means, oh, he's, you're a communist. I think even someone like Academic Agent, when he's not in full virtue signal mode online, would more than likely admit to having a certain amount of sympathy for Neil Kinnock. He seemed to be a very able politician of his day. He had a very, very high ability when it comes to rhetoric. He was a very good public speaker. But he was lumbered with the equivalent of the SJWs. Back then, one coined the phrase the loony left. And there are, I think there is if one looks on YouTube, one will find it under Neil Kinnock, that speech. And it's basically when he goes at the people of the loony left who were running at Liverpool at the time. And he just mercilessly piles into them, as in, I think, the highlight of the speech is when he goes, "Oh, well, yes, and a Labour Council are doing," and this is one of the things you don't get with politicians these days. Politicians who criticize their own side, who will basically come out and say, "You're morons. You have to change or you're going to be slaughtered," and in that regard, it was Neil Kinnock who is largely credited with bringing the Labour Party back from the dead. sort of after the Michael Foot years and whatever, after they'd sort of gone pretty much all out communist, he was the one who kind of patiently had these fights with his own party in order to try and persuade them that, you do actually need mainstream politics that are effectively acceptable to the mainstream public.
Yeah.
You can quote the Communist Manifesto with each other until the cows come home. Nobody in this country wants this, and you could sort of see how he was a very able politician, a very able leader, but he was hamstrung by his own party, if you know what I mean.
JS has said, Kinnock, we're all right. Lucas, we're all white. And Radical Liberation says, the incentives for going trans, if only women can have political power, does boggle the mind some.
There you go.
You can imagine it all.
Jessica Yaniv, UK Foreign Secretary.
It's not even Yaniv. It's just all of the entirety of the UK Parliament immediately switches gender, and they all come in skirts. We've all adopted Scottish national dress, from the get go, and it's just like. We'll all speak with male voices. We'll still be able to retain.
That you said that.
We'll still be able to retain, the male voice, the beards, etc. Because you can't judge people who just claim they're trans. You can't question it either.
Of course not.
And what it will become is that in 100 years' time, no one will remember why this bizarre tradition that all our politicians wear dresses in the House of Commons began, but. Now it's a ceremonial robe,
Yes, just as once upon a time, they all had to wear a top hat if they wanted to make a sort of parliamentary motion or whatever.
Yeah.
And the speaker and whatever used to wear a wig and so on. In that same way, all parliamentarians suddenly would be following the tradition of wearing a dress. I would particularly be looking forward to seeing Jacob Rees-Mogg enter.
What, wearing a floral print?
Dressed as some kind of southern belle from Gone with the Wind.
Do you think he should have pigtails as well?
Oh, very much so.
Definitely, potentially a straw hat as well.
Or perhaps Dennis Skinner should be the one with the pigtails.
All I know is that John Burko is definitely going for a pixie cut. The Irate Pirate says, Stefan Molyneux versus Caroline Lucas, cage fight when? I don't... who is it? Stefan Molyneux has been going off on one recently as well, hasn't he? I keep seeing him on my timeline being particularly aggressive about...
I've not got him on my timeline because he blocked me.
Did he? Why have you managed...
Yes. I had the audacity. He had this period... in which he was constantly going on about what's it called? These artificial currencies. What are they called? Cryptocurrencies.
Yeah.
And he was constantly banging on about, oh, this is the way to go. People should buy cryptocurrencies. It's independent from this, that, and whatever. It's cryptocurrencies. And once in a while, I would just ask a question. Mr. Molyneux, are you by any chance invested in cryptocurrencies?
Mm-hmm.
Just basically wondering whether that might be one of the because encouraging other people into buying into something that has a given value when you are, let's say, invested in it. One might say that it might not necessarily be driven by an ideological.
Well, let me put it this way: I wouldn't be.
There might be a financial aspect to it.
I wouldn't be upset if enough people invested in Bitcoin to make it worth, 3 or 4 times what it's worth now. I'd be a very happy boy.
So with me once or twice asking that, I was then blocked. I mean, of course, I was also sarcastic as hell on other occasions, but it was actually the cryptocurrencies that seemed to do it.
Oh, you pushed him over the edge.
Yes, I pushed him over the edge just by basically implying that he might have a financial interest in encouraging everybody to buy cryptocurrencies. Because I suggested, well, I was just wondering whether he might be invested in the thing he's encouraging everybody to buy.
Don't let anyone ever tell you that you're not a sassy biatch, Britisher. That's all I'm saying.
Yes.
The little AOT Aroa might actually have got it there. Says some of our female MPs breastfeed in Parliament, and obviously that's New Zealand. Who was it? The Prime Minister of Australia, was it, or was it New Zealand?
No, it was New Zealand who took her baby into the UN chamber.
That was right, and just breastfed as she gave her speech. Which is, it's definitely for the sake of the baby. It's definitely not a political play in and of itself, is it?
Yeah, that particular woman. I mean, that's the one that's gone sort of gun law crazy after the Christchurch
decided
event,
that if a school shooter, a mass shooter, wants you to become an authoritarian hellhole state in order to destabilize the entire country, thinks that that's a good idea, you should totally do that.
Yeah, you see, the one thing that turned me against her was effectively her first statement as New Zealand Prime Minister. Because her first statement was, "Oh, by the way, I'm pregnant." Which was followed by her announcement that she intended to take full maternity leave.
You have to remember as well, Brisha, that New Zealand, like Luxembourg, is not a country that's difficult to run. So they must be fine.
But so basically, she stands for election. During that campaign, it emerges that she's pregnant, but she keeps that to herself because that might damage her electoral chances.
Yeah, of course. If people
no sooner is she elected, she announces that she is pregnant,
and that she's going to bog off
maternity leave. And then she has the kind of gall to kind of say, "Oh, well, I wouldn't be the first professional woman in a position of leadership to take maternity leave." You think, hang on a moment, you've just been elected to the high honour of running your own.
And there are some jobs which really do not stop when you stop.
Yes. And yeah, she then just basically decided to kind of flaunt motherhood at everybody. So the baby went everywhere, including the United Nations.
Yeah.
And yeah, it was kind of,
it's definitely not abusing the baby, but, abusing the position of motherhood in order to push a particular message, one which I don't think is actually that viable. In general, she's like, "Oh, I'm breastfeeding my baby whilst giving a speech," and so on and so forth. But how many people were talking about that speech the next day? And how many people were talking about crazy Prime Minister breastfeeds in front of Parliament,
Yeah, I mean, there was such an entitled attitude.
There is a big difference.
When it came to the announcement that, "Oh, I'm pregnant, and you're just going to have to leave it or lump it."
Deal with it.
And you just thought, hang on a moment, these are the people who just elected you.
Yeah.
And you're just basically telling them that you're going to be gone for a year.
Right. This isn't me, taking a dump on mothers who work or anything like that, because, it's one thing to discreetly, make sure all the baby's needs are met and so on thing. It's another thing to get your tit out in the middle of your workplace.
Well, it's also another thing to be elected to run a country and then telling your electorate that, "Oh, for a year or so, someone else is going to do it."
Yeah. It seems strange. I don't know how long the terms are over there for, that kind of position. But
I have no idea. But I say that one I really thought was just stunning. That, I think that was one of those moments to kind of see almost like an abuse of democracy taking place.
Yeah.
Because when you vote for someone, you expect that someone to be the person you've actually elected to office.
Yeah, they've misrepresented their position and their commitments and so on and so forth. So, it's difficult. I do have for a slightly lighter note to kind of round off the stream. It's 3 years apparently. Says our resident New Zealander. I do have sorry, not a guest selection. I have an audience request for an article for the worst photo campaign ever run. And can you tell what it is off the top of your head, Britisher?
The worst photo campaign. What are we talking about with a photo campaign?
Okay,
it's a bit of a vague term.
The worst campaign photo op ever. So it is.
I see. So basically, this is some kind of politician, and something went somewhat wrong.
So here we go. Matt Bennett can still hear the reporters laughing, over 90 of them. He can still picture Sam Donaldson doubled over guffawing on a riser that looks out over a dusty field in suburban Detroit. Bennett was a 23-year-old political rookie in 1988, and he was sent to the General Dynamics facility in Sterling Heights, Michigan, to organize a campaign stop for Democratic presidential nominee Michael Dukakis. A ride in a 68-ton Abrams main battle tank M1A1.
Okay.
The visit, meant to bolster the candidate's credibility as a future commander-in-chief, would go down as one of the worst campaign backfires in history. I tell you what, I will, for the sake of everyone watching, I will try and get a browser and then hopefully window capture. And that appears to be a black screen, so that's not ideal. Let me get rid of that. URL will be what we have here. So this is, yes, they value my privacy. No, that's not either. So I can get that up, but I can't do anything with the web page. Display capture. Let's try that. Capture this display. Not coming up. Okay, I'm just going to have to read it to you, unfortunately. Being a pain. Tom of Loxley saying the worst photo op, was that not Diana in the tunnel?
Oof.
A little bit on the nose there. But
well, it's funny that you mentioned tanks. I've left you a link in Twitter. Because of course the most famous tank photo op, which may have been the one that inspired the Dukakis photo op, I don't know, was one of Margaret Thatcher and Helmut Kohl on their respective tanks. So obviously, Queen Thatcher was on a British tank, and Kohl, I think, was on a Leopard. Was it Leopard or Leopard 2, something like that? And they were on some maneuver ground, if you know what I mean. So they did a lot of riding around on their tanks, and the press just absolutely loved it. And I think it's from there that I'm not sure about the time scale, but that might have been what inspired the Dukakis incident you're talking about.
Let me. I don't know why several of the images are loading. Let me try and reload this. Basically, the point of Dukakis was he was a diminutive character, pretending to be a tank driver.
Are you saying he was a François Hollande?
Basically, let me see if I can find a better image for. Generally, backfire. How to destroy a political. Bit. So if I pull up this thing, yeah, this is okay. Image. Browse. So this, which will come up for everyone who's listening live first, but pretty sure you'll see it in about 30 seconds, is the diminutive Mr. Dukakis going in this tank, and he does look absolutely tiny. So what were we talking about just briefly, aside from?
Well, as I say, aside from Mr. Dukakis looking rather diminutive on a tank, the only thing I can think of there are Thatcher and Kohl on their tanks.
Yes,
They,
yes.
but they were at the time, they were believed to be cutting rather good figures and advertising their products on the world market rather well.
Yes. It clearly could be done.
And
The Iron Lady in her iron
yes,
tank.
the Iron Lady sort of doing her sort of Queen Boadicea impression with a headscarf and goggles. Yes.
Marvelous.
Yes, it was one of those things that you see it once and you never forget.
Ratface says, thoughts on Trump's Epstein tweet? Has he put one out?
Well, didn't he put one out that kind of, I think it was he tweeted a link to someone else's tweet, so he retweeted something that was kind of talking about the conspiracy theory of the Clintons being involved or something like that. So people are saying that Trump was kind of pushing a conspiracy theory.
Let me see if I can.
I wasn't much surprised to hear it, but when it comes to my view on the whole Epstein thing, the very fact that we have nothing really to go on other than the fact that he conveniently died, makes it almost impossible to actually point to someone without just sort of mindlessly assuming. Because I think with a lot of the people who are making these assumptions, I think they should always kind of ask themselves what it tells the rest of the world about them that they're making that assumption, as opposed to what it really tells us about the Epstein case.
I can't see any actual tweets by him recently. Unfortunately, so if you can link that to me, Ratface, either tweet it at me or drop me a message, and I will look that up. But I can't see that. What I can see is Joe Biden making a fool of himself by saying poor kids are just as smart as white kids. Do you hear me, Butcher?
Well, yes, yeah. I mean, when it comes to things like that, I'm a little than most, because I think a lot of politicians will kind of misspeak on the moment. I mean, I know Joe Biden has a knack for it, but when Donald Trump misspeaks, we hear a lot of the same people who are now saying, "Oh, Biden is an idiot for saying something like that," saying, "Oh, well, it could happen to anybody. Anybody can misspeak. We all know what he really meant to say." And yeah, I'm sort of in that school of thought of there are plenty of things to have a go at Biden for. Talking about which, given that I mentioned Neil Kinnock earlier, Joe Biden blatantly ripped off one of Kinnock's speeches. This was back in the 80s.
Americans ripping off speeches? Now that's not something.
Well, there is
before.
a famous speech of Neil Kinnock's, which I think was used for a party political broadcast, and it was a speech of his to a Labour Party conference, in which, as I say, Neil Kinnock had the gift of the gab. I mean, I say had, he's still around. And he held this speech in which he kind of said, why am I the first in, a line of, in my family, in 1,000 generations to go to university? Were all my family thick? Did they not make an effort? All those people who went down the mines and worked hard, 12-hour days and whatever. And it's a really sort of impassioned speech in which he's kind of making, obviously, a point about equality. And lo and behold, a few weeks later, Joe Biden is filmed doing exactly the same thing. Why am I in my family the first person ever to, and it's exactly the same thing. He just blatantly ripped him off and just thought, oh, well, an American audience will never realize
that
it actually came from over there. And when it comes to something like that, I'm much more critical than when it comes to someone just misspeaking on an off chance. Because look, we've all been on live streams and have kind of, had a Freudian slip or something like that. When it comes to Biden and that thing about poor kids and white kids, we all know what he kind of meant to say. And I think one has to, in some cases, also be fair with people one doesn't agree with, if you know what I mean.
So Ratface has sent me this Donald Trump retweet, which Terrence Williams saying, died of suicide on 24/7 Suicide Watch. Yeah, right. How does that happen? Jeffrey Epstein had information on Bill Clinton. Now he's dead. I see Trump body count trending, but we know who did this. Retweet if you're not surprised. Clinton body count, Clinton crime family, hashtag Epstein suicide. Yeah, that's a little bit on the nose.
I mean, there's one interesting point, and that is the one that Razorfist did, the Rageaholic.
Yeah, I know.
He spoke of how that particular hashtag seemed to be trending, and he looked into it, and the locations across the United States that were kind of making this trend seemed to be spread fairly evenly across all 50 states.
Huh.
But then it suddenly ceased. The trending status was suddenly gone, and instead, the Trump body count hashtag was there. And when he looked at it, there was no figures attached to it, so you couldn't see how many retweets or anything like that. It was just trending mysteriously. And all of them seemed to be coming from California. And he said, well, isn't that remarkable that A, all of it is coming from California, which one could say is the big liberal Hillary Clinton bastion, or, of course, one might also want to point out that Twitter is based in California.
Yes, isn't that interesting, Bridget? I think that's the best we can say about it. Isn't that interesting?
Well, yes, I mean, there are, when it comes to the Epstein thing, I think the one thing I would like to point to when it comes to conspiracy theories, I'm not completely averse to conspiracy theories. What was
Are you
the
saying
chap
you're not
called?
going to sit on a fence about this?
Well, when it comes to Epstein, I am sitting on the fence because I'm saying, look, folks, what people are trying to do is point to someone in particular. Whereas, of course, we have actually a multiplicity of parties which could be involved. And therefore, it's almost, to me, the most likely thing is that he had a self-interest in committing suicide if there is any truth to these allegations. So we don't necessarily need any, when you come to Occam's razor, you don't necessarily need to go as far as Clinton's. Whereas when it comes to, I'm just trying to remember his name. There was a doctor, he was the chief British weapons inspector. He was the one who coined the phrase the dodgy dossier prior to the Iraq war. Perhaps someone in the chat can help me out. And he suddenly turned out to have committed suicide. And at that time, I was also saying that does seem extremely convenient. And, if you consider what would afterwards have happened, if you've basically got your nation's chief weapons inspector saying this is all complete nonsense, this doesn't exist, there is no evidence for it, I am the person, there you go, Craig H. has just helped me out, it's Dr. Kelly. And he basically says there's absolutely no evidence to point to Iraq having any weapons of mass destruction anymore, and so on.
Yeah.
Now think this through. Think for a moment if the guy wouldn't have died. And then you would have had the war. All those people would have died, including lots of British servicemen. And then it would have gone full circle, and people would have said, Mr. Blair, where are these weapons of mass destruction? And then the chap who actually said all along, there is no such evidence, would have still have been alive. Do you understand? To me, that seems much more of a kind of screaming case of there more than likely having been some wrongdoing. But again, I fully admit there is no outright evidence with which you prove anything like that. But there was at the time several factors which people pointed to saying this looks very dodgy.
I see.
But when it comes to something like that, or it comes to something like Epstein, I am much more willing to think when it came to Dr. Kelly that there was some dodgy dealings than kind of pointing to a specific individual with the Epstein thing when you haven't really got much to work with.
Yeah, unfortunately, I just don't know enough about the internal politics of it all, and I'm obviously no expert on prisons. If the prisons are anything like the ones over here as well, there is certainly a large amount of scope for not what I'd call malpractice, but overworked guards not being able to, keep by the.
Well, I think this was actually one of the things that was pointed to when you mentioned overworked guards. That I believe one of them was on his 5th night of overtime.
Yeah, so one of my mates is a prison guard for the UK, which is obviously not quite the same, but they have 27 staff for 2,000 inmates. So
yeah. I mean, that was one of the tweets I sent off today, and it's always interesting, isn't it, that certain tweets always gain a much more popular response than others. So if you're responding to what are believed to be Wiltshire police folk standing there with people dressed up as dogs, and you react to that, funnily enough, you get a much greater response than if you fire off a tweet addressed to Boris Johnson saying, "You're promising 10,000 prison places," and everybody's greeting this with a great hurrah, which I'm not one of them. But you're promising 10,000 prison places. But right now, our prisons are deemed to be in complete chaos because it's believed they just simply don't have enough staff.
Yeah.
So are these 10,000 prison places going to be properly staffed? And for some reason, there aren't thousands of people that immediately chime in and go, actually, that's a good question. Let's see if Boris Johnson has got anything to say about that. It's strange how partisan people can be, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because I think that's actually that's actually a perfectly non-partisan question to ask. As in, you've made this promise, but we already have this pre-existing problem, and this is in exactly the same field. So are you just basically intending to increase the absolute hellhole that is the British prison system by another 10,000 places? Because if so, you're not really improving anything.
I am going to unfortunately stream to sleep as is. I am trying to keep up with you, Britisher, but clearly I don't have the stamina. I've been up an awfully long time, and
I've even got the flu. See, I hope you feel terribly terribly weak and pathetic.
It's not.
By the way, is that Colonel Gruber in his
little tank? Yes, his little tank.
Yes. There was, of course, that wonderful episode where the resistance nicks his little tank, and where he's completely beside himself, running into the cafe of René's, going, "My tank, my tank! They've stolen my little tank!" Which, yes, is just priceless. Do you know that that comedy, Allo Allo,
yes,
in export terms, was actually the BBC's most successful ever comedy?
I did not know that. I know it was the first ever. I know it was the first one that ever attempted to put, as far as I'm aware, that attempted to put foreign accents on sort of British exposition. So
yes, and it was a high wire act until the very first day of recording. They didn't know whether it was going to work, so they had actually put together the entire production, and the screenwriters were still not sure whether it was going to work.
Yeah,
because they weren't sure whether
it would translate well.
The audience would have the suspension of disbelief of understanding that these are the Germans and they just speak with a German accent.
And these are the French.
These are the French and they just speak with a French accent. And these are the Brits and they just speak with a sort of completely posh,
over-the-top British accent.
Schoolboy, over-the-top English accent.
Good King's English, as it were.
And then, of course, you had the... that one was a godsend, I must say. The spy Briton who had been parachuted in, who pretended to be the local policeman in order to not attract any attention from the German garrison. and it was a kind of joke on people who are of one nationality speaking another country's language, but badly.
Yeah.
So he was always getting his vowels mixed up. So they understood what he was trying to say, but it was the fashion in which he said it. So he would come by and say, "Oh, good evening, René. I was just pissing by." And yes, it was, how shall we say, it was fairly unsophisticated humor, but for its time, it was actually very, very funny.
Yeah. I need to go have a rewatch of some of that older stuff. That and Porridge, I need to rewatch.
That is after you've watched Ben-Hur, Spartacus.
Oh, all this
High
other stuff. No,
Noon,
I've got my list is endless.
Lawrence of Arabia.
My list is endless. But unfortunately, as it feels like I'm currently standing on a bed of needles, and I do need to get my feet up rather sharpish, I am going to have to bring the show to an end. But thank you very much to everyone for tuning in. And thank you for joining me, Britisher, in your I was going to say inebriated state, but your infirm state is better.
My infirm state, yes. And I would just like to point out to everybody that this very wonderful piece of artwork that has been put up, not so obvious, is modelled on Ivan Rebrov.
I am not modelled on Ivan Rebrov. Ivan Rebrov was modelled on me, clearly.
Happy Googling, everybody.
And the beard is mainly due to the fact that I've decided to grow a bit of facial hair at the moment. Maybe some of you will have seen that. JS has had a last second super chat and says Froggy's AA diss trap is 5:30 UK time tomorrow. Spicy, yes, that goes live before UO. He's been working on it for a full month. He's very proud of it. So I hope that you all will tune into that and enjoy that.
Well, I'm waiting for Jordan Peterson to complain about it.
And with that, we must end. So thank you very much to everyone. Thank you to the Britisher, as I've said before. And we will see you next week on next week's Fake Accents Unite, hopefully at a more reasonable time, a little bit earlier. And as that, maybe I might even be able to produce a video this week. Who knows? Take care, and good night. Siskoan says, Ivan Rebrov was built much better than I was. So thank you for that, Siskoan. Take care.
Toodle bib.